Scrum Team has 3 accountabilities: the Product Owner, the Scrum Master, and developers. Collectively, they form the Scrum Team, a cross-functional group of people, typically less than 10 in size, committed to achieving product value. Imagine them like a 3-legged stool, with each of those legs of the stool of equal length. There's no hierarchy between them. No one leg is more important than another. Importantly though, they each stand accountable for something different. If any of their legs were to fall, the value sat on top of the stool would fall down. It's a nice way to imagine how interlinked and interwoven the 3 accountabilities on a Scrum Team are. It's not to say though that each of these accountabilities separately isn't important. In fact, it's entirely the opposite. They each fulfill something that is vital to deliver value to stakeholders. A simple summary might be that the product owner is accountable for product value, the developers are accountable for creating the increment, and the Scrum Master is accountable for the effectiveness of the Scrum Framework. You'll notice that I keep using the word accountability and not role. I just want to take a moment to explain the differences between these 2 terms because it's important. A role is a job title. You could have been hired as a line manager, a software coder, a hardware specialist. Your role doesn't matter in a Scrum Team. Your accountability, though, is a series of tasks and actions that are instrumental to delivering product value. And that's what matters in a Scrum Team. Let's take a moment to try a short activity. As I've said, there are 3 accountabilities in the Scrum Team: the Product Owner, the Scrum Master, and the developers. I want you to take a moment and write a list of the types of activity you think that each of those accountabilities might fulfill. Pause the video now, and when you come back, we'll review each accountability in detail and see if there is anything on your list that was correct. We're going to start with the Product Owner. The Product Owner is one person, not a committee. This point is really important because where you have multiple people making a decision about product value and what to work on next, you create multiple sources of truth and therefore confusion amongst the Scrum Team. In simple language, the product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the product. Each product owner has their own unique way of doing this. However, there are 4 things the product owner is accountable for as per the Scrum Guide. Firstly, developing and communicating the single product goal, creating the inspiration and direction for the work of the Scrum Team. Secondly, engaging with stakeholders and users of the product to identify their requirements and then clearly creating and expressing them as product backlog items. The product owner should be the most knowledgeable person about the product backlog and be able to help the developers refine and create clarity for what is needed on each item. Thirdly, the product owner is accountable for ordering those product backlog items. The product owner's decision making is made transparent through the ordering of those product backlog items. And finally, fourthly, they are accountable for ensuring that the product backlog is transparent, visible, and perhaps most importantly understood by those who will be turning the product backlog items into a valuable increment of product. Importantly, the responsibility of carrying out these accountabilities may be delegated. However, the accountability must always remain with the product owner. For example, sometimes it's relevant for a developer to create a product backlog item. That's great, and in many cases to be encouraged. But the product owner will always be accountable for what that developer has created. To use an analogy, a parent may delegate the care of a child to a babysitter, but the parent is still accountable for the safety of that child. Referring to something I said earlier, the product owner is one person, no matter how big the product is, and it is fundamental to the success of the product owner that his or her actions and decisions are respected by the team and the organisation. Sometimes they're going to need to make tough decisions that won't make everyone happy, but we always trust the product owner is acting in the best faith for the product. If anybody wants to influence the product backlog on the product owner's decisions, they need to try and convince the product owner first. The second accountability in a Scrum Team is the Scrum Master. He or she is accountable for establishing Scrum as per the Scrum Guide. That doesn't mean they should prevent and restrict the Scrum Team from experimenting. However, they help the team to understand the benefits and purpose of each part of the Scrum Framework from the perspective of theory and practice. They do this to both the Scrum Team itself and also the wider organisation. A lovely phrase comes to mind when describing the accountability of a Scrum Master. It's that they are true leaders who serve the Scrum Team and the wider organisation. Referring again to something I said earlier, there is no hierarchy in a Scrum team. A true leader does not mean a boss. Now, the Scrum team serves different stakeholders of Scrum in different ways. At the immediate Scrum team level, they help by coaching in self-management, how to focus on high-value increments, causing the removal of impediments, and ensuring that Scrum events take place and are positive. The Scrum Master is commonly seen as a coach, and that is certainly one of the positive stances a Scrum Master can take. I would encourage you to pause the video at this point and read Barry Overeem's brilliant white paper titled The 8 Stances of a Scrum Master. It's short, powerful, and incredibly well worth reading. The Scrum Master also serves the product owner by helping them to find techniques to do many things, including product backlog management, making product backlog items transparent, improving their facilitation skills with stakeholders. All of this education is one way the Scrum Master can support the product owner. And finally, the Scrum Master also serves the organisation through many activities, including improving the relationship between stakeholders and Scrum teams, planning and advising on Scrum implementation within the organisation, and helping employees and stakeholders enact an empirical approach to complex work. You'll notice a pervading idea throughout the things I'm describing, the way in which a Scrum Master serves at different levels. The Scrum Master is not just working within the immediate Scrum team. He or she has an internal accountability to the Scrum team, but also external to the wider organisation. In order for them to improve the effectiveness and fulfil the accountability for establishing Scrum, they need to look beyond the immediate Scrum team. And last, but by no means least, is the developer accountability. These are the people who collaborate through sprints to produce one or more usable increments. We often describe the developers as being cross-functional, that is, that there's no such thing as a tester, a business analyst, a document writer, etc. Collectively, they are all accountable for developing the product, and therefore we call them developers. That doesn't mean to say developers don't have specific skill sets, as in almost all cases they will. However, by segregating due to role and skill set, there is often a creation of "this isn't my work" mentality, and that's not how developers work collaboratively together. They are each equally accountable for the achievement of the sprint goal, even if it is outside of their immediate skill set. The developers have 4 key accountabilities within the Scrum Framework. The first of which is that during sprint planning and throughout the sprint, they are accountable for creating a plan and adapting it as needed. This is called the sprint backlog. Secondly, they commit to conforming to a definition of done. They create it, adhere to it, and instill quality in the increment by using it. Thirdly, during the daily Scrum or at any reasonable point, they are accountable for adapting their plan each day to ensure it is more likely to meet the sprint goal. And finally, they hold each other accountable as professionals. Something that I've often seen, particularly when it comes to developers, is that it is not their job to become involved in Scrum events. It's painful. This is simply not the case. The developers are accountable, as I've said, for creating any aspect of a usable increment. In order to meet that accountability, they must be involved in all of the Scrum events. Otherwise, how can they do that? So those are the 3 accountabilities of a Scrum team. They are fundamentally a small team of people. There are no sub-teams, but they are a cohesive unit of professionals focused on one strategic objective at a time. Importantly, they are described as self-managing, in that they describe who does what, when, and how. Collectively, the Scrum team itself holds the accountability for creating the valuable, useful increment every sprint. They complete all product-specific activities, demonstrating an end-to-end delivery of value. The key takeaway from this video is that there are 3 accountabilities in the Scrum team, and they work together to produce the valuable increment. If any one of these 3 accountabilities isn't being filled well or correctly, value is going to suffer, and consequently the product itself will become less stable and less